Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the M3 market update, which is a little late this week due to some travel that I did in the Caribbean this weekend. Sorry about that. As well, the video will be a little bit shorter today. There's a lot going on. Hoping to have a really robust update for you on Tuesday in the regularly scheduled time, but still kind of digging out from being away from the weekend. So let's just get started right away. A lot happening, a lot going on. Again, we have conflicting messages. So the biggest kind of news from this week was on the housing starts. In the Substack, I talk about this, what I think may be going on, and I want to talk about, I spent actually quite a bit of time digging into the starts and completions in this survey of construction when I got back from Austin. And for those of you who have not seen it, my pinned tweet is about Austin. You should check it out. But when I got back, what I couldn't understand is that if I looked at the raw numbers of permits that were filed, starts, completions, it just did not jive with what I was seeing on the road. And so I spent so much time playing with the numbers, trying to understand what I could be missing. There was a local guy in Austin that had some cool charts on these starts, completions, etc. I talked to him, and still it just didn't make any sense. So what I did is dig into the methodology, and the methodology on a component of this is a survey. And I shared in the Substack this week. Many of you who have been reading my Substack have seen this reference before to the Wall Street Journal article that's talking about how we are having some trouble with the surveys and how they've become a lot less reliable. And I would just say, generally, this is what I'm sensing, is that the data is less reliable. Now, if you say something like that on Twitter, it just starts a firestorm. But, quite honestly, nothing else quite makes sense because none of the math is adding up. So what I do think might be happening is that you had this jump in starts, which could be related to, I think, people feeling a little bit more confident that the banking crisis was behind us, that the stock market was taking off, the whole NVIDIA madness, which, guys, if you've never read some of the books on the booms in our in our country, highly recommend. This behavior is just so, it's a template. It's honestly a template, and we're just following it in so many ways. So I'll put some links in the show notes to some books that I would recommend. I think I have one out there already. But this behavior is very, very typical. So we need to look at that in context. I think maybe we don't believe that because we've been told by the Fed and other people that, they've fixed all this. We don't have boom and bust anymore. But, guys, I think that with everything we're witnessing, you guys have probably started to understand that is just not true. So housing starts, what I think could be going on is people got excited. They saw the new build increase in sales, and they said, okay, let's just go forward with these projects. Okay. But this is how it always happens. They're doing it at the last minute. Everybody's piling all in, and so they're not going to catch the wave. I mean, that's just not how it's going to happen. And so I do think that sentiment probably played a big part in some of the increases that we saw. Also, a theory that I have, which I can't, prove right now, is that probably some labor started to free up. Now, what I saw on the road was definitely, construction sites where what I'll call the mega sites, where they had a ton of different builders. So you'd have Lennar, Pulte, KB, all in one big site. And you could actually see that some builders had ceased work while other builders were still going strong. And so I think what could be happening is that as we start to see the credit crunch get tighter and tighter and tighter, some of those projects are just going to stop. And I think that's what's happening. I think that had already happened. And I think you finally have labor freed up to start some of these other projects that had been delayed. Now, We'll have to watch, we'll have to see what happens to see if this theory proves to be true, but it's a theory. Additionally, I just want to say that, kind of the numbers themselves, just so you know, the last 2 months in this survey had been revised down. So just if you could take a minute, look in the Substack kind of on the methodology of this survey. And I think that you won't have to read too deeply to start to understand why this could be problematic. And we certainly should not be looking at this one piece of data to tell us what's going on with the housing market as a whole. One thing that I learned, it was such a critical lesson during the GFC as I was managing default, is that you had to look at the local. And now this is very hard if you think about it from a company-wide perspective. You're trying to create a process that could be utilized across all 50 states. That's how you could get an economy of scale. But with something like default, it's a legal process, and so you have to understand all the local statutes. Similarly, what I'm going to argue is that if you don't understand some of these local areas and the dynamics there, you're never going to get this right. And I think that so many people like to sit on top of the ivory tower, hide behind their models, and not walk out and actually see what's going on. So you guys may know her, Danielle DiMartino Booth, did an incredible weekly briefing on Anecdata, which is, essentially a bunch of stories from across the country about what's happening, all these things we're talking about, what's happening with Airbnbs, what's happening with rentals, etc. Fantastic. If you can get your hands on it, I definitely encourage it. She included in there a story that I sent her about a food bank in Phoenix. This food bank was featured in The Age of Easy Money, which is a documentary on PBS that if you haven't seen, again, that is just something you should definitely check out this weekend if you're a little bored. But in that documentary, they talk about this food bank, which at that time was busier than it had been during the worst times of the pandemic. Well, recently, last weekend, my buddy from Phoenix sent me a note saying that they were doing a local story about that same food bank, but what's happening right now are the people that were volunteering are actually showing up for food, guys. And so there are people that sit on top of their ivory tower behind the models, and they're just shouting as loud as they can, and it makes it hard for most of us that are trying to piece together what's going on in front of our eyes with that shouting. And I've had several followers this week just tell me, this is just so frustrating. I don't understand what any of this means. When am I going to be able to buy a house? And as an investor, when should I be pulling the trigger on either getting out or getting in? Those are big questions for people. This impacts their finances, and I understand it can be very confusing. So I'm going to do my best to be here each week, giving you the news and giving you context, because what I will, as opposed to being a doomer, what I am is an optimist, trying to look at this from multiple angles, all like a 360 view, so that we aren't surprised. Of course, that's not possible. We're going to be surprised by some things, but the more sort of context we have, I think the better off we'll be. Okay, so the other thing was existing sales. So this is, again, something else I would love to spend, kind of just do a paper on. Like, why have we sort of separated out existing sales from new builds? Okay, so that's what everyone needs to know, is that if you're ever just kind of, John Smith on the street wondering, wait, didn't we just have sales numbers 2 weeks ago? This would be the difference. It's the existing homes that are not new, that was reported this week, slightly up. Now, what I'll tell you, what I saw for the 60 plus cities I track and Redfin, and they do include new builds. Good grief. In these cities, there were definite increases in sales, which is why you probably had people sort of get excited and start building again. Because I think I've talked about this a little, but the juice, what happens in this industry is called gain on sale, and it's a drug. It was a drug during the securitization days. It's just a drug, and if you can do enough of it, and that is booking enough sales up front, and that again, this is booked when you write that first contract, not the final one. You can book that income, and if you can book that income, you can cover up any of the gremlins in the back end. And so it really does behoove everybody in this game that once they see sales happening, to kind of, okay, let's go in now, let's get this done now. And so it's almost like conditioned behavior. And so, keep that context in mind, because the other thing that I saw, significant sort of price, I don't want to say median price increases, or it looks to be. Again, I feel like this is misleading because of all the buyer incentives, the buy downs. Let me give you your kitchen sink, your appliances, let me pay XYZ for the first year. They're pulling out all the stops to move this inventory, but that runway is going to run out, especially as the credit crunch sort of continues. So here's what I would say: context is everything. And I think that when we see new build sales, they're going to be up. And if they're not, then that tells you why the local is so important. And not just local MSA, but a local city. And so much of what happens in our data with like Case-Shiller, all these big surveys, they use MSA data. And if you think about it, it's just a much wider area than, say, looking at just Atlanta City. And so these types of things can make the data say something very different than what's happening in front of our very eyes. So again, context is everything. Okay, don't have a lot of time today, so I'm just going to speed through this. Apologies. Nothing went as planned this week, which that's the way it always goes. So we'll just get started, because there is some interesting stuff going on in the listings for sale. So one thing I want to say is I added Sevierville a few weeks ago. This is the kind of the capital in Appalachia for Airbnb, and there is some interesting stuff going on. There's some articles I'll try and sort of post for you that talk about how that happened. But you had private builders coming in, you were selling things on Facebook. This is going to be a very interesting place to track. In fact, I may actually spend some time there in an Airbnb this summer, just kind of seeing what's going on, because I think this is a place of trouble. Okay, so listings for sale this week, not as big of an increase week over week that we saw last week. However, still some really notable movement in the top 5. So Hoboken at number 1, 8.24%. Bozeman was up from number 4 last week at 4.78%. Salt Lake City down from number 2 last week, but up at 3.5%. Sevierville up at 4.35%. I mean, that's pretty significant. El Cajon 3.2%. So seeing Bozeman and Sevierville in there, Bozeman is also a destination location. And remember those two names, because they're going to come up again as we go through the updates. Okay, quickly. So top cities that with largest increase in inventory from the start. So our top 10 did not change, but we had Coeur d'Alene move up to the top spot, pushing down San Ramon, San Francisco. So Coeur d'Alene almost 80% from January 1, San Ramon 78%, San Francisco 77%, Denver at 57.64%, Austin at 52%, number 6, San Jose at 44%, Boston at 43.79%, Galveston at 42.55%, Seattle at 40.4%, and Portland at 38.3%. Okay, so I think it's going to be interesting to see how these top 10 change over the summer, or if they stay the same. So I just, again, I'm a total geek. So again, I'm I'm repeating myself from prior episodes, sorry, but I can feel the turn. And so this is where all of this work that I've been doing since January is actually going to pay off, because we're going to have averages. We're going to see if there is degradation. We're going to see if there's not degradation. So essentially, okay, rent. So this week, just looking at rental listings. Next week, we will focus on kind of single family rental listings. So here, number one, Bentonville, I can never say that, up almost 10% in listings. And these are listings for rent. Very excited about this metric because we'll be able to see the shift from long-term listings, from listings for rent to listings for sale. As my grandmother told me, haste makes waste. So sorry about this, guys, but it was a crazy day. Okay, so number two is Hoboken. Winter Garden in Hoboken was around 9.4%. Winter Garden's around 9%. Sevierville, again, at here, and so listings for rent up at 7%. So not only are there listings for sale up, but so are there listings for rent. So this is very interesting. Bozeman, same thing, up 5.29%. Okay, we've got some cities with decreases in single family rental listings, and these interest me. So hope to spend more time with this data very soon. But so essentially, El Cajon listings are down around 23%, Tampa down around 18%, San Diego down around 15%, Los Angeles down around 9.3%, and Newport Beach down around 8.7%. California and Tampa. So very interesting there. Again, hope to spend some time with this soon. Airbnb, this is actually kind of cool. So as you guys know, I was obsessed with Memorial Day weekend, kind of looking at prices, and what I saw happening there was just prices going up, and it just seemed so ridiculous with all the other news that we were getting. But again, in many ways, and we've kind of said this before, but is this the last hurrah? We keep forgetting that there's still money coming in, through these tax credits, things like that. Student loan repayments haven't started yet. That's August. So maybe there were some people that were just like, hey, this is it. My life's going to be over. So let's go do this last vacation. That could have been it. But what's fascinating now is to actually compare the average. So all those weeks I tracked that Memorial Day weekend price changes. I'm taking the average and comparing it to this upcoming holiday weekend for the 4th. And so this is fascinating. Not the first one on the list, but so this is the average price decreases comparing Memorial Day to our next holiday weekend. Indianapolis down 55%. Ventura down 55%. So those two weren't as interesting to me, but Rosemary Beach down almost 43%. This is a huge one. There was a tweet that Daniel DiMartino Booth did that I retweeted about the fact that in Rosemary Beach, they'd sent out flyers saying, listen, you don't have to do a 7-day minimum anymore. 3 days is fine. So that's another anecdotal story that she included in her fantastic post, that things aren't as good as it may seem on the surface. So Rosemary Beach down 42.63%. This is huge. Hoboken, again, weirdly showing up here, down almost 32%. Boston down 31%. Sedona down 30%. Las Vegas down 25.6%. San Francisco down 25%. Fort Lauderdale down 22%. And Miami down 17.72%. So just if there's a lot in common with this top 10 as kind of destination locations, except for probably Indianapolis and Ventura, but hey, you never know. Okay, then there were some cities with increases, and this again is very interesting because a lot of it was California. So again, there could be something local I don't understand. That's why I love your comments. Tell me what you're seeing. Okay, top cities with Airbnb average price increases week over week. I'm sorry, not week over week, but comparing Memorial Day to our next holiday weekend. El Cajon up 80%, San Diego up 62%, Encinitas up 41%, Carlsbad up 36%, and Coeur d'Alene up 32%. And then finally for commercial real estate, big article in Bloomberg today. I'll probably post that in the show notes as well for you guys to check out. There is some of the numbers are just staggering, and it is just so pervasive, guys, that this is a really big problem, and it is highly likely that we're probably going to get some government intervention here. I do not see anything else happening. So anyway, stay tuned. Sorry for talking 100 miles a minute and not talking coherently, but much to do today. Hope to get caught up this weekend and spend some more time with you next week. But thank you as always for stopping by. Please reach out to me on Twitter at m3_melody, M-E-L-O-D-Y, on LinkedIn at Melody Wright, Substack, M3 Market, M3 Melody Substack, and then here on YouTube. I love your comments. I love the engagement. You guys can ask me to add cities, and if I'm not tracking it, I likely will. So please, comment, and thank you again for watching. I really appreciate it. And have a great weekend and happy first day of summer. Thanks, everybody.